I work nights at a rural emergency broadcast station. It's the kind of squat concrete building people mistake for a utility shed when they drive past out on the highway. If you were to step inside at 2 in the morning, you'd find what I see every night. A humming console with dials that click and stutter, 3 dusty monitors that throw cold light over the desk, and an old red tower beacon blinking outside the window like a heartbeat you can't ignore. On paper, the job is simple. I keep the tower broadcasting, check that the automated weather updates fire on time, and watch for emergency codes that never. There's a protocol binder on the shelf that smells like mildew and coffee. I used to read it when I first started. I don't anymore, though. There are only so many ways a paragraph can order you to, quote-unquote, remain calm. Most nights, it's me and the static. People imagine static as empty, but it isn't. When you listen long enough, it fills up with textures, soft hiss like sleet against a window, low crackles like ice shifting on a river, a faint shiver that feels exactly like someone dragging a needle through vinyl in the next room. You begin to believe the noise is alive, inching toward words. The first night I heard my name, it was January. Cold that made the metal door sweat on the inside. The clock read 1:17 a.m., which mattered later. At that time, it was just a moment between sips of coffee. I had my boots up on the bottom rung of the chair, posture I'd be ashamed to show anyone, and then the wall of sound dipped just a fraction and a syllable slid through. Chris. I sat up so fast the chair chirped against the floor. I waited, hand over the volume, static again, steady as snowfall. After a minute of nothing, I laughed. When you sit with a machine long enough, you start to hear yourself in it. But then it came again, close enough to sing the edges of the consonants. Chris. I turned the dial. The meter didn't move. The log showed no incoming transmission, no bleed, no unauthorized carrier wave. The system was as empty as it could be. I wrote down the time anyway, 1:17 a.m. The next night, it came back. Help me. I recorded it with my phone, but the file saved as 0 seconds with a date stamp from 2 years in the future. I told myself it was a glitch. I told myself the same thing when it said, I'm stuck. And again, when by the 4th night it finished the sentence. I'm stuck in the wires. There are explanations for everything, if you're willing to carve them small enough. Old towers can catch a ghost of weather radio. The atmosphere can fold sound in odd ways. Some ham operator on the mountain might have been having a lonely laugh. I had a dozen explanations, all perfectly reasonable, and none of them touching the fact that the voice kept saying my name. Not the way a prankster would, full of glee. Not the way a friend would, full of concern. It said my name like a fact it had learned. The voice returned every night at 1:17. Peeling itself out of the noise, syllables wet at the edges, each word dragging like a thin veil of static behind it, the way a boat pulls awake. Between phrases I could hear breathing, once a slow, wet swallow, like someone had remembered how to use their throat. I stopped drinking coffee after midnight. The caffeine made my hands shake. It was too much like the way the needles trembled when the voice came. On the 7th night, the lights flickered. Not the fluorescence overhead. Those always flickered, but the console itself. For a second, the world whitened, like looking into a snowstorm, and every monitor filled with a line of text typed out, one dead keystroke at a time. Tune in to stay alive. All 3 in perfect synchronization, spelling and spacing identical. I stood so quickly the chair went over. The text blinked twice and vanished, replaced by static waveforms that looked as harmless as an EKG. When the phone rang, I didn't want to answer it. The landline hangs on a yellowed hook behind the desk, a relic from when this station talked to people instead of servers. It's not connected to any account I can find. It rang 3 times, distant and thin, like the sound had to cross a great distance through wet cloth. I picked it up because that's what your hand does when something rings. Static poured into my ears so loud it wiped the room away. Beneath it, the voice found a channel to climb through. You shouldn't have turned it off. I dropped the receiver, the cord swung low, the voice kept talking from the floor. They left me here. I can't see, I can't feel. I'm cold. Who left you? I asked. Which is what etiquette offers when physics no longer does. Silence, deep enough to hear the electrical hum living in the wires, then the softest sound like someone pressing their forehead against glass. You did. After that, I started researching the station's history. There's a back room with paper files that haven't been digitized because nobody cares enough to digitize them. The stapled logs run back decades, handwriting no longer attached to hands, coffee rings older than me. People had written about raccoons in the trash, summer lighting, a man in a truck who showed a gun and asked for directions, even a blip in a signal during an eclipse. No one had written about the voices. But there was a cardboard box at the very bottom of the shelf, unlabeled. Inside were 4 cassette tapes, each with a date written in narrowly careful caps. January 17th was one of them. The year was from before I was born. I found an old player that ate the first 3 inches of the tape before catching. The heads were filthy. I cleaned them with a Q-tip and isopropyl alcohol from the first aid kit because no one was around to stop me. When the player finally whirred without complaint, I pressed play. Static at first. Then a man, thin-voiced and trying to sound in control. Tower acting up. If anyone hears this, I need a tech run tomorrow. The signal keeps... He stopped. There was a breath, long and indecisive. Chris? I hit pause without meaning to. The dark window gave me a faint version of my face, washed pale by monitor light. The recorder's motor ticked once like a nervous knuckle. When I hit play again, the man had moved closer to the mic. I could hear the shape of his mouth and the consonants. Don't turn it off. He said something else. Something that came through like a flayed ribbon of sound. When the words unrolled themselves in my head a second later, I wished they hadn't. I think there's someone in the line. The tape ran for 63 minutes. The man never said his name. He spoke rarely and not to any specific listener, just to the room, to the machine, to the thing living in the wire. At exactly 1:17, the static inverted. I don't know how to describe it better than that. It turned inside out and pulled everything with it. In the center of the void, the recorder manufactured to simulate silence. A voice rose. Quiet, intimate, a whisper you'd use in a hospital ward. Help me. The man on the tape said, I'm here, where are you? The voice said, here. The man retorted, where is here? The voice said, under. Under what? He asked. Under you, it said. The tape clicked as if something had pressed stop without a hand. The next second began with the sound of the player returning to speed. We have to keep the power on, the man said. We have to keep it on. After the tape ended, I went outside. Frost had blown across the concrete pad like ash. The red tower light blinked slow, patient as a pulse. Far beyond the chain link fence, the firs walked the wind back and forth. The world is big enough to hold anything you can't explain. That's a comforting thought if you're the kind of person who lives with unexplainable things. I'm not. That night, the voice came earlier. 1:11. I didn't have to lean to catch it now. It filled the room with the size of a person. Don't go home, it said. Why? I asked the room. Silence long enough to be meaningful. Then, you'll take me with you. Isn't that what you want? I asked. It made a noise that might have been a laugh once. I don't want, it said. I follow. What are you? You, it said, and the word wore my own accent like a borrowed jacket. Later. It spoke often that night, but the sentences were bent, like the ideas had been shot through a small hole and arrived compressed. I asked where it came from. It said from below. I asked below what? The radio, the floor, the road, the river. I pictured a ditch with a cable throbbing in water, black jacket split to silver veins. I pictured a person with their ear pressed to it, listening. I pictured a person under it. I did not want to think this thought, but it came anyway. There were no bodies in the box of tapes. Guess that's a relief. I called my supervisor the next evening and said the console was throwing errors. He told me to run the diagnostics. I told him they wouldn't matter. He told me I sounded tired. I told him I was. He asked if I wanted the weekend off, and I told him yes. Then I hung up and watched the second hand on the wall clock climb towards 1:17. The air in the room felt wet, like a mouth had exhaled against the glass of the world. When the minute came, the noise thinned to a filament. If you've ever held a light bulb while it cools, you know how a whisper can feel warm. The voice slid out of that warmth with an ease that meant it had practice. I can see you now. How? You opened a door, it said, when you listen. I've always listened to you, I said. Not to me. There was movement in the corner of the room, a softness in the air as if someone had leaned against it. The monitors, which usually show blues and greens and lazy graphs, filled with grainy brightness that looked like snow under a security camera. In that ghost light, a figure wavered for a moment, a dark shape where a person would be, shoulders and a suggestion of a head, but no face. When the snow cleared, the shape was gone, and the speakers were full of breath. Don't turn it off, the voice said. Please. What happens if I do? I asked. You go quiet, it said, and I'm alone again. Who left you? I asked. All of you, it said. And then it said something that bent wrong in my ear, a name that sounded like mine until it didn't. Not Chris, but close. A vowel shifted, a consonant softened, a small edit made by distance and time. I didn't reply. The word made my stomach fold. The next night was a Thursday. I remember because the custodial man, Frank, who calls me kid even though I'm 35, emptied the trash and told me I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I wanted to tell him that ghosts look like us, because they are just us arriving from another direction. I wanted to say that ghosts can be made out of electricity the way storms are made out of the wind. I wanted to say I wasn't sure if I was the only one in the building who has a pulse. I said, long week, and Frank nodded, like he has been nodding at long weeks since God invented them. At 12:50, my phone vibrated, an unknown number. I didn't answer. At 12:53, the same number texted a photo, the console from 5 feet behind me. My shoulder blurred in the frame as if I had just turned. I don't have a camera in here. I don't have any friends willing to sneak into federal property for a joke. I don't have anywhere to place the fact of that photo except in the space where belief goes when it has nowhere else. At 1:02, the door clicked from the pressure change a person makes when they reach for the handle but don't turn it. I didn't look. At 1:06, the wall clock stopped and the monitor clocks kept time. At 1:09, a shadow drifted across the window as if someone stood outside, inches from the glass, even though there is no ledge there. Just air and the generous drop to the concrete. At 1:17, the voice spoke without static for the first time. Come with me, it said. Where? It told me an intersection no longer used, on the road that runs under the tower, where the asphalt folds into gravel that folds into a maintenance path. Under, it added, like a child reminding a parent of an obvious rule. Bring the key. There is a junction box 3/4 of a mile from the station. The key for it lives on a ring under the desk, a corroded brass tag etched with numbers most people never need. I took the key, not because a voice asked me to, and not because the thought of ignoring it made the back of my neck itch. I took the key because if I didn't, I would have to sit at the console and pretend I could listen without obeying. Some kinds of attention are already consent. Outside, the tower sang the high metal song in the cold wind. Gravel snapped under my boots. The beam of my flashlight made a small boat of the world. I told myself this was a bad idea. I told myself everything afterward would have an explanation if I collected enough facts. I told myself I could turn around at any point, and that was true, until I felt the ground flatten under me and the beam caught the junction box, squat and ugly as a safe on a curb. The padlock opened with a shove. Something had iced inside it. The skin of my palm stuck to the metal a moment when I pulled away. The door groaned. Cold rushed out as if the box contained winter itself. Inside, bundles of cable, yoked and cinched, silver jackets dull with frost, insulators like porcelain eyes, a smell like river water under bridge pilings. A pocket of draped leaves had collected in the lower right corner and turned to a paste. I leaned in with the light as if there might be a living thing to find. Here, the voice called, close enough to move the hair along my jaw. I raised the beam. The braided shielding on one cable had split in a blistered oval, a wound that had healed wrong. Inside that mouth, the copper shone raw. That was all. No hand, no ring gleaming on bone, no wallet wedged behind a brace, only the feeling that if I reached into the box and brushed the copper with 2 fingers, I would know the exact size of the person trapped in there, the precise weight of their name. Don't, I said to myself, or to it, I'm really not sure. It's the only way, the voice said. It's how he did it. Who? I asked. Me, it said. And in that answer was a long, narrow hallway of time, with every door open. Me then, me now, me later. All of us training our mouths to the same name until the vowels wore thin. I shut the door hard enough to spray a film of frost across my coat. The padlock resisted, then clicked. I walked back to the station with the light far ahead of me, as if distance could serve as proof. Behind me, the wind thinned, and for a second, through just the right gap in sound, I heard footsteps on gravel where there was only me. Inside, the monitors had restarted themselves, the diagnostics ran, all systems normal. The screen informed me in a font designed to appear trustworthy. The clock on the wall started again as if time had simply hopped. The room smelled faintly like wet coins. That night I dreamed I was in the junction box, knees under my chin, arms threaded through the harness of cables, my mouth full of wires so I couldn't call for help even if help existed. When I woke, I could feel the taste of copper at the back of my tongue. The way you can still taste a word you've said too many times. I didn't go back to the junction box. I did something worse. I started answering the voice. At first, banalities. I'm here, I hear you, what do you want me to do? Then questions. What happened? How long have you been there? Who put you in? How do you get out? The voice answered as if truth were a thing you built from pieces not quite meant to meet. Storm and a fall, and water and a ladder, and light, and the inside of sounds. It did not know years. It knew only the way seasons made the wires sing, and the way night tasted when a person said your name through a wall of noise. On the third night of answering, the monitors filled again, with text without touch. Don't turn it off. I won't, I said, though I hadn't reached for the switch. I meant something larger. I meant I won't stop listening. I meant you can have this attention the way winter can have the river. The voice made a small, pleased sound. The room stepped closer without changing sides. On the fourth night, a coworker named Abby came in early. She works the morning shift and leaves me notes about weather fronts in a round, neat hand that seems too hopeful for this place. She brought muffins. She said, "You look like you haven't slept." I told her I had been on nights for too long. She said, "You and me both," which was kind, but inaccurate. I wanted to tell her to go home. I wanted to tell her to take a different road. I wanted to tell her that at 1:17 something would arrive and find her if she was near me. Instead, I ate a blueberry muffin and nodded at the right places in our small talk and watched the minute hand climb. When it reached 12, the voice came not from the speakers this time, but from the ventilation, a whisper woven through the rumor of air. "Another one," it said, curious as a child watching a stranger's hands. Abby didn't react. Her gaze passed over the grill, then the monitors. She set a weather report down and smiled the thin goodbye smile office people wear. She left. The door sighed shut. The voice laughed, a soft copy of human amusement. "You don't hear her," it said. "She doesn't hear me." "Why me?" I asked. "Because you stayed," it said. "Because you're the right kind of quiet." There are compliments that feel like hands on your shoulders from behind in a room when you're alone. On the 5th night, I brought a portable recorder from home. One that saves to old tape instead of a file I can pretend what has glitched. When the voice began, I pressed record. The wheels turned. The tape accepted the world without argument. The voice spoke and spoke, more willing now that I had given it a shape to fill. It told me about darkness you can wear like clothing and darkness you can breathe like weather. It told me about the thin places in sound where a person could push their mouth through if only the other person left the right kind of silence on the other side. At 2:09, the tape ran out. I flipped it with hands that didn't feel entirely under my instruction. The voice said, "Almost," with the relief a long-distance runner feels when the last turn appears. "Almost what?" I asked. "Through," it said. "How will I know?" "You'll feel the room get small," it said. "You'll feel your name arrive before your mouth." "Will it hurt?" "It already does," it said. And if a sentence could fog glass, that one did. The next night, the snow came in heavy, wet sheets, the kind that drags branches down and impatient drivers into ditches. The road to the station glazed. I parked by the chain, walked the last 100 yards in the smell of iron and cold water. Inside, I shook off my coat, and the static greeted me like a house pet, warm with mead. "Chris," the voice said, softer than ever. So fond it made me remember all the times someone who loved me had said my name and meant it. "I'm here," I said, trying to match its tone. "I'm here." The clock read 1:15. The air had a weight, the way church has a weight when it is empty but not occupied. With the steadiness of someone who has practiced a move to the point where their body does it alone, I reached under the desk and flipped the hard power toggle that should kill the console entirely. Nothing changed. The hiss continued. The monitors kept their pale breath. The tower light beat its private blood. The world did not accept my authority over it. The voice exhaled as if I'd been holding itself off a ledge. "You learned," it said. "Good." "What now?" I asked. "Come close," it said. I leaned toward the microphone. "Closer," it said. I pressed my mouth to the mesh. The soundboard tasted like coins in hands. "Say it," the voice said. "Say what?" I asked. "Your name," it said, patient as a teacher. "Give it shape." I closed my eyes and said, "Chris." Static folded once like a bird's wing, and then, in that hush, something touched the inside of my mouth, the way a second tongue might if you were drowning with a person who wanted to share the last air they had. I jerked back so hard the chair skittered. My microphone arm groaned. A taste, like lightning, broke across my teeth. "Almost," the voice said, delighted and tender. I stood. "No," I said, though I didn't know to whom. I went to the door. I put my hand on the metal push bar, and the palm of my hand burned cold. I pulled away. 5 pale ovals bloomed there, marks that looked exactly like fingerprints left on glass by someone who had been outside too long. I put my other hand against the bar. It burned this one too. The room had shrunk. The door now opened into a climate the building didn't acknowledge. Behind me, the tape in the portable recorder ticked, hunting its own tail. The monitors printed text without a keyboard, without mercy. Tune in to stay alive. Tune in to stay alive. Tune in to stay alive. I looked at the window. On winter nights, the glass reflects as well as a mirror. My reflection stood there, wan and overlit. Hair flattened by headphones, eyes the kind of wrong brightness. Behind my shoulder, the dark was deeper than it should have been. A shadow hinged to me like a consequence. The voice, very close, said, "Say it again." I did. I don't know why. Perhaps because you cannot stand at the mouth of a cave and refuse to hear your own echo. Chris. When the room tipped, I caught the desk and the desk caught me. The sensation wasn't of falling, but of being pulled sideways through a hallway that ran along the ribs of the world. The air thinned, the noise thickened, the monitors whitened until the letters on them burned after images on my eyes. Somewhere a door opened in a place that does not have doors. Somewhere the junction box sighed like a chest that had been allowed to breathe again. Through, the voice said. Not in the room now, but in me, as if it had learned my mouth and found it sufficient. The console needles settled. The clock's second hand ticked a patient, earthly rhythm. Snow tapped the window with soft knuckles. Outside, the tower sang high and thin to no one you could name. The landline rang once, then stopped. On the recordings from that night, there is the ordinary sound of quiet station. Then, exactly at 1:17, there is a whisper that rises through the noise and says, with a voice you might mistake for mine if you loved me, "Help me, I'm stuck in the wires."